everyone. Welcome to Word Vancouver. I'm really excited to be speaking with Emma Côté and Gurjinder Basran today on their books, Unrest and Help I'm Alive, both wonderful titles. And this event is called What We Leave Behind. My name's Ling Kaye. I'm a writer and editor based here in Vancouver. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are here gathered on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish people, and just so grateful to be able to live, work, create on this land. So thank you. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to thank all the donors and sponsors of Word Vancouver. A special thank you to SFU and the Writer Studio for this wonderful space and their continued generous support of Word Vancouver, the Canada Arts Council, the Canada Book Fund, the Canada Heritage Fund, the Canada Periodical Fund, the BC Arts Council, BC Gaming, Creative BC, the City of Vancouver, DBVIA, the Joseph Wask Family Foundation. You can tell this is a much beloved festival with just so much support from the community, which we are so grateful. That's how any of this work can happen. So continuing with our generous sponsors, the Hamper Foundation, the BC and Yukon Book Prizes, the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop, CWILL, Pace and Associates, the Crime Writers Association, the Federation of BC Writers, the Surrey Library, the Vancouver Public Library, the League of Canadian Poets, the Writers Union of Canada, the Vines Festival, and many more. Many of them actually have booths outside, which are really great to check out. And I know we've all been enjoying wandering and meeting people in real life, which feels very, I think this is my first live moderated event in a really long time. So
same. I went to an actual live music venue for the first time in about 3 years last night. So that was amazing.
Wow. It's starting to feel a little more like normal life, but we're really excited for those of you who are tuning in from afar. Thank you for joining us. It's extra special that we can all be together in many different formats. So thank you, whoever's tuning in. If you haven't already, please check out the festival online. They have a silent auction. They also would really appreciate any support. It's at wordvancouver.ca. So who do we have here? I'll start with Gurjinder. She is the award-winning author of 3 novels, Everything Was Goodbye, Someone You Love Is Gone, and Help I'm Alive. Gurjinder's groundbreaking debut, Everything Was Goodbye, was the winner of the 2011 Ethel Wilson Fiction Prize, which is just an incredibly illustrious list of finalists and winners. So congratulations on just that amazing accomplishment and with your debut, I think. So that's amazing. And it was on many must-read lists, including Chatelaine Magazine's Book Club pick and CBC's Writers to Read. Gurjinder is an SFU Simon Fraser University Writers Studio alumni and is currently a mentor at the Vancouver Writers Manuscript Intensive. So if you want any of that expertise, do check out their website. It's
absolutely VMI.
Yeah. So that would for any of you writers, that is an incredible resource to just have really hands-on guidance. Gurjinder balances the demands of her career in connected technologies and her creative life, and she is working on her 4th novel. Very exciting.
It is.
And very productive, 2011 to 2022. And
I think we measure our time in books now, not in days or years.
Just incredible. And we're going to get into kind of how you are, that's beyond balance. That's just like turbo juggling. But Gurjinder lives in Delta, BC with her family, and she's joined us here in Vancouver. Emma Côté is from a small town in Northern Ontario. So we are extra lucky to have her joining us here in Vancouver today. The bio says the winters are long, but the books are aplenty, which resulted in Emma studying journalism, English literature, and creative writing, and most recently completed a postgraduate certificate in publishing. Now, Unrest is your debut novel, but it was the winner of the 43rd annual 3-day novel contest, which, again, any writers know is an extremely impressive accomplishment and kind of like on the bucket list of many, many authors. So just fantastic. And when Emma isn't rereading or rewriting a novel, so there's more in progress, that's really exciting. She can be found taking walks in the forest and asking people if she can pet their dogs. So she's doing great in Vancouver because there's lots of dogs here who need petting and are used to it.
Yes.
So yeah.
It's been lovely.
Oh, good. Well, welcome. So congratulations to both of you on the launches of your books. Can you tell us a bit about them and what your inspiration was for writing them? Aside from the deadline of a 3-day novel, but
Yeah, I'm really interested in hearing that. Actually, maybe I'm going to ask you, can you tell me and everybody at home about that? Like that is
Mhm.
tremendous.
Thank you. Well, I mean, so is 4 books, and I don't even want to talk about how many years, but but thank you. Yeah, it was a pretty interesting competition. I had never heard of it actually, and a friend of mine who the book is dedicated to sent it to me, and I said, no, thank you. I'm not going to do that. It sounded too hard. I was working on my first novel for 7 years before I even had a final draft or first draft. And she said, well, we could just like think of it as creating a draft and it'll just be, just us and we'll support each other. And so I agreed to do it. And I kicked my partner out of his own home. And I used the house as a quiet place for the weekend, sent him to the cottage. And I just kind of sat down and we supported each other. And there are many times that I didn't think I was going to finish it, but I think you're kind of banking on entering a bit of a flow state that the deadline and the fact that you paid a little bit of money to enter the contest kind of makes you, it really puts the pressure on in a way that makes you want to finish. So yeah, I think I wrote for 16 hours a day for the 3 days. Saved a bit of time at the end to edit, or well, to pretty it up is kind of what I did. I just very bare bones, and I made sure it was in the first person and kind of colloquial so that it wouldn't be too hard to polish. And yeah, essentially just sent it off. And to be honest, and I hope Anvil wouldn't be upset with me saying this, I said I never want to read that again. I never want to look at it again. And I put it in a virtual drawer and completely forgot about it until they emailed to say it was on the long list. And I said, no, that must be a mistake.
and this is your first time
Submitting,
joining,
yeah.
So
Yeah.
to the 3-day novel.
It was, yeah.
So what was the amount of time from when you heard about the contest to like actually sitting down?
About like 3 days, like maybe 3-4 days.
So you had 3 days to think about it, decide to
Yeah.
join, kick your partner out, and
Yeah.
then you're in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I did have I typed out an outline, and it was always supposed to be this stack of postcards was discovered by an estranged daughter after hearing that her mother had passed away. But it was set in completely different places, and it had kind of a sweeping. It was too ambitious. And at some point, I just kind of threw all of the plot points out the window, and she became a mortician, and she was on a road trip in her hearse across America.
How did that happen? How did she become a mortician? Like, did the voice come into your head, or just an image?
Honestly, yeah, I don't. I wish I had more awareness, but it's almost like you're in a fugue state. Like just kind of writing, and you just have an idea, and you hope that it's a thread that you can follow, and it's not going to lead you astray. I think honestly that you're Googling so much at the same time and researching on the fly. I might have Googled interesting jobs, and that mortician was on it. And I said, okay, that could work, because of the subject matter that I'd already wanted to work with. And then, yeah, it kind of took off. She just sort of started forming from there. So.
And that was in the first day?
Yes. Yeah, that was in the first day. Yeah. Yeah. Originally, she was going to the graves of famous suffragettes, and there was all of this other kind of historical, and I was like, what am I doing?
She already had that draw.
Yeah.
Already like the death and the
Yes.
postcards.
Yeah.
She was visiting grave sites.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a pretty incredible process, and I'm so thankful that Anvil has taken the contest over and is going to be keeping it going, because it's really a nice way to get out of your own way and to just really dedicate some time to writing. So it's something that Zoe, who had originally sent it to me, and I think will always do it. Yeah, unless something, big is happening at the same time. But yeah, it's a great way to get a draft out. So if anyone ever wants to join in.
I don't know. I would just be thinking of how many words per hour, how
Yeah.
many words per.
The best way is to per day, really. And then
Yeah.
you just don't get there.
That's reassuring.
Yeah.
Incredible. Thanks for telling us a bit about the origins. I'm sure we're going to come back with lots of questions about that. How about you, Gurjinder? What was your inspiration for this book?
I had, I'm always inspired by an image or something that comes to me. And so I had an image of a boy on a bridge. And then that same boy was falling. And it stayed with me for a while in the way that I was like, well, what is that about? Why is he there? Why is he falling? And I started writing from his perspective, from his posthumous perspective. And then I realized that the book isn't really about him. It's really about what happens after he's gone. And at the same time, my children were teenagers, and I had seen that they and everybody that they knew, and all the parents, myself included, were struggling to figure out what is happening with our kids. Everyone seems anxious. Everyone seems depressed. Parents, teachers, like everybody. There's like a mental health crisis, and that was even just pre-pandemic. And so I wanted to write into what it means to witness someone's life and to just really be there and to not only think about the aftermath when someone's gone, but what that reveals to you about your own humanity.
Wow.
It didn't take 3 days.
No, I can imagine not.
Right.
Yeah.
But, but it went fast, as far as a book goes, I think about a year of active writing.
Wow, that's incredible, because there's just so many layers and details and images and just full narratives of many different timelines.
Yeah.
So that's amazing.
But
how they all fit together.
But I have to say, I really like what Emma said about like how much writing is about getting out of your way and not questioning what you're doing, because that was a lot of my process, because it's very different than anything I've written before. And so I really had to put my own judgments about, is anybody going to read this? Is it any good? This is nothing that my publisher or anybody wants or expects me to write. Like, why am I doing this? Yeah.
You're tuning into kind of like the zeitgeist and
Yeah.
forming it into a narrative of it, which feels very much of these times.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Thank you. Wow. So we've kind of touched on how both Unrest and Help I'm Alive are head-on reckonings with death and death of loved ones, loss. But ultimately, they're also explorations of how those left behind can continue, find the will to continue in the world of the living. So did you know the arcs of your protagonists before you started writing? And I think we've kind of touched on, but I'm not, I'd like to delve into that further. Or did they emerge organically over the course of the writing? And kind of like while we were asking, you said, you found some dead ends and then you backtracked. So can you tell us about that? How did you discover the arcs of these characters?
For me, I did not know anything that they were going to do. So first it's just getting to know them, and it sounds silly to say, but they do appear, one at a time, in service of each other to move the story forward. But my question was always, well, what's going to happen? Right. I think sometimes we can get lost in our own writing and not realize it has to move forward. Like something must happen, like page to page. And so I never knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
I would say the last half of the book, I won't do any spoilers, was a complete surprise to me. I had no idea that was going to happen.
Wow.
And it was just one of those things where I literally said, well, what if I just do this? What if I just put them on the road together? What will happen? And then it took the book in a completely different way. There was a new lightness, a new hope that isn't in the beginning of the book.
So you posed to yourself the question, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And then you can feel the energy if if it's right, and then you just keep moving. I can see how that would be fun, and how you'd be working on that quickly.
Absolutely.
Because you want to find out.
Yeah, and there always has to be a problem. Like that's
Yeah.
the one thing it's probably maybe the only thing I know about fiction. There always has to be tension. Like if there's no tension, there's no need to continue reading. And it doesn't have to be the propulsive tension that one finds in a mystery or, a page turner. But there still has to be this tension of they're not achieving what they want. Right. And a book is about getting them to that end.
And so do you kind of consciously, as you're writing, put obstacles in their way to see what's going to happen? Do you set up problems for yourself for the characters that then they have to solve? Or like, so I hear that they have to, how do you get that going?
I don't think I give them problems, but boy, do I seem to set up problems for myself.
For yourself.
Just in trying to figure out what's going to happen next. So yes, I do sometimes just put them in situations and see what might happen.
So does that mean you're normally a plotter or not?
I am not a plotter.
Wow. And I can't even
organically
imagine. To me, that without having a plot, planned out, it's like staring at a blank page. And I normally plot really, really thoroughly down to the scene. And then this is the first time that I've just gone completely off script. So maybe that's just a way to tap into it a little bit, into your creativity more.
And in fairness, I say I'm not a plotter in that I know some writers will have their Post-its, like they're so organized, it's just got their cork boards and everything. I probably plot a little bit in my head, saying to another panel, whether I'm doing the dishes or walking the dog, I'm often trying things out in my mind.
You are.
So, I'm a child of the 80s, 70s and 80s. I am a child that sat in front of the TV, watching TV. I imagine life as a TV show. And so I'd probably be running through scenarios in my mind of what if. And then I'm plotting in my head, but actually I never write anything on the page that's plotted out.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Wow. Thanks for sharing some of that process. And we had that beautiful transition. Amber, you were speaking about, so you have been a plotter in the past, but for this one, just because that timeline you're speaking about, no plot. Tell us more.
Yeah, I just ended up throwing it out the window completely, I guess, because it like I said, it was trying to go to too many different places. And I just wanted to narrow it in and kind of see what would happen to her. And I think for me, there were times when I said, okay, something bad needs to happen here, so to keep that tension going, because I always knew it was going to be the main journey that she was going to go on. And the thing that she was going to overcome was just, processing the death of an estranged parent is very challenging. So I wanted her to also just struggle with relatable things too. So at one point her engine catches on fire because there was a squirrel nest or a rat's nest in it or whatever. And these are things that I know that have actually happened to people. And so I wanted to throw some little obstacles in her way in that way. But I also kind of was open to whatever direction it might go. And I think that really did allow me to tap more into the creativity. The second year that I did the contest, I once again kind of bit off more than I could chew. And somehow I ended up going down this like Bitcoin plot and I didn't know anything about Bitcoin. So I ended up doing all this research that at the end of the day, I thought, okay, I'm just going to write as much as I can. And I think I only got about 12,000 words written in the 3 days. And to be kind of in the running you have to have at least 17,000. So with Unrest, the draft came out at about 20,000. So I didn't make it that year, which was very humbling because here I came in thinking like, I can do this again, no problem. But it really is about the idea and whether or not it's the kind of idea that you can just follow. And I think most ideas are, but you have to be open to the fact that you might follow a thread that doesn't go anywhere, and you have to be okay with that. Which is, I think, I was always trying to have this control of the plot by detailing it out to the scene, and because it made me feel secure. But there's something to be said for just letting it kind of go and seeing what happens.
You can probably go back and plot like once you have that first bad draft, then you can see it all and see, oh, I've missed a scene. I've missed something critical had to happen earlier. right? And that's where I would go back and start to write on a note card. I need to insert a scene here or a half a scene.
Yeah, but it's very practical to run through them, kind of like Doctor Strange, just like all the different scenarios in your head before putting the pen to paper.
I think that's a symptom of just like the busy lives we lead,
Yeah.
right? I wish every day was a 3-day novel contest.
Yeah.
That we could just do
Yeah.
that.
It is very luxurious to be able to do that for 3 days. And yeah, it's not something that a lot of people would be able to do. So it's kind of become this sacred time that I make sure to put aside, as long as I can. But
So how many 3-day novel contests have you done now?
I've only done 2. So I actually had to skip it this year because I had another prior engagement. But it is definitely going to be something that I'll at least, just for fun, because it's quite entertaining to be a part of the crowd and see everyone's kind of, increasingly chaotic texts and messages and Instagram posts. And, people are up at 3-4 writing through the night. And I've actually made connections with some of the other people who are really staunch supporters, and they've been so supportive of my career thus far. So it's pretty incredible community.
I mean, it's about as close to athleticism as writers are going to get. So, this is like our amazing race.
Yeah.
It's 3-day novels, right? Nice. Well, this is a great time. Maybe we could hear from the books. Gurjinder, would you mind starting a reading, and then we'll move on to Emmett?
Sure.
Thank you.
So it's not a plot spoiler because, on the first page, we find out that someone from the school has died by suicide, or an alleged suicide. And so the students are back at school. At school, the halls are crammed with backpacked bodies, like always, but there's this extra feeling, like the heaviness you get in your chest when you're keeping a secret or telling a lie. Only it's not contained, it's alive with a virus-like spread. The popular girls are crying in huddled masses. Mascara runs down their cheeks as they work at mastering sentiment, sullen expressions, and the not too ugly cry. They don't know how to do anything but pose and pretend. And the boys, they just nod and look away, never quite making eye contact. Head down, hands tucked in pockets, he avoids them all, weaving and maneuvering his way through the day as if he were a rat in a maze. An announcement is made after first bell. We're shocked and saddened by the sudden passing of Jacob McAllister. Our hearts and prayers are with his family and friends. No mention of the details, only that there will be counselors on hand for the next few weeks. People who didn't know him act sad. People who did know him are legit stunned. Teachers whisper out of one side of their 2 faces, gossiping about Jay's mom and how she must be feeling. Ash wants to tell them to stop talking about Jay like he's an event, like some epic winter storm that he'll recall when they're old. And Jay's mom, how she's feeling is fucked. Not in her usual too many night shifts, cash-strapped, chain-smoking way, but in the life is never going to be good way. Ash feels bad for her. Lisa tries hard, like most moms do. He can still hear her calling down the street as Jay skated away. You come back here, Jacob McAllister. His name caught in the whirring of the wheels, syllables eaten by asphalt. No one saw this coming. He was a happy kid. He had a girlfriend. Sure, Winona was a bit weird, but still, he had someone. Jay wasn't like the cutters who carve at their arms in the bathroom stalls, or like the bullied kid who hanged himself in the art room. That's what everyone says, at least. Now that he's gone, everyone wants to know him, to know why, to insert themselves into the story and make it mean something. But there's no making sense of it. Jay jumped off the Lionsgate Bridge. Even though Ash saw it, he doesn't want to believe it. The sky was too blue that day. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Emma?
So beautiful.
We'll chat
Just
more
so
later.
beautiful. Okay. So yeah, I think we've already gone over that the main character is a mortician and she's lost her estranged mother. So I just thought it'd be interesting to go back to kind of that moment when she's first finding out. Like pretty much everything else except motherhood, the funeral industry used to be dominated by men. But in recent years, nearly 60% of mortuary science students have been women. I don't know why there's been such a sudden shift. Maybe all their parents died too. But what I do know is that it's a smart move to make because the industry brings in $16 billion a year just in the US alone. Can you believe that? I mean, now that you know a thing or two about the numbers, you can probably believe it. And thankfully, death isn't something that scares me anymore. Not my own, anyway. But you could definitely say I have a sixth sense about it. I can feel it coming, like the shift in the barometric pressure, warning of a storm. So that's how I knew something was up that day when I came home from work early. But it had been so many years since I'd felt that sense of offness that I didn't recognize it right away. I walked around my one-bedroom apartment, touching my items, making sure nothing was out of place. Perhaps I'd been robbed instead? I straightened the yellow throw pillows on my couch, which was reupholstered in a vintage teal velvet. When I got to my desk, my fingers reflexively reached towards it, to the one piece of art I owned, a small oil painting of a bowl of fruit with a human skull sitting where an apple should be. I tilted my head from side to side as I was looking at the painting, as if it might shift or change. When I was certain the image wasn't going to mutate, I took a scan of my own body. I ran my fingers over my flaming red hair, pinned up in 1940s victory rolls, and inspected the seams of my vintage zebra print blouse. Everything was still in the rightful place, my retro appearance and my subsequent rejection of how a funeral director should be. It wasn't until I was back in the kitchen boiling water for a cup of tea that I noticed the little red light flashing on my answering machine. And before you say it, yes, I have heard a voicemail. I have it at the funeral home, of course, amidst the calming shades of beige and soft fabrics. But in my own home, I prefer all things retro, as you well know. Nobody ever calls me at home, I said aloud, let alone leaves a message. The fear was instant. It seemed to me that it could only be bad news. Nobody would bother leaving a message for anything else. You'd have to have friends or a partner or a life for that. I pressed play and held my breath. Hello, this is Randall Ahola, executor of Cerise Andrews' estate. I'm very sorry to do this via message, but I'm calling to inform you of your mother's passing. There are a few things here that need to be sorted out before we can move forward with anything else. Please call me back at this number at your earliest convenience. Again, I'm very sorry for your loss. I tilted my head to the side, as if I'd forgotten altogether that I had a mother and that she could, in fact, die.
That's so good.
Thank you.
Thank you both. I mean, these are just so impressive texts because it's very difficult to write about these topics, and both voices manage it with just like this incredible balance of like a deep reckoning with the experiences, but then also perspective and humor as well. I was just really interested in kind of how did you balance that fine line of writing about death while incorporating wit and the occasional joke? I mean, in both these, or you know, even cynicism or kind of like there's still an irreverence to it. So how did you go about that?
Oh, for me, it wasn't a conscious decision. I think I just have a very dark sense of humor.
Me too, same.
It's just built, it's hardwired.
Exactly.
Exactly.
You know what, I think my own life has been marked by a lot of different losses. And I think it's obviously the one thing that we will all experience and the one thing that we resist experiencing.
Yeah.
And so I find that in and of itself funny. Like our own resistance to our mortality and everything that comes with it.
And you lent some of that to some of your characters, because
Yeah,
especially certain teenagers, well, they weren't. It wasn't just their. I mean, it was also how they viewed the world around them, right? With irreverence.
I think they have a lot of clear-eyed cynicism. They're not angsty. I wouldn't say that they're angsty in the way that all teenagers are. Like they have to rebel against something. That's just what a teenager has to do. But I do think that these teens in this book, and I think teens right now, they have a lot to be upset about. They have a lot to be cynical about. They don't have as much hope. they have a lot of problems they need to fix. And these characters, they can see through all the adults in the story, and the adults hate that because they want to be the superheroes that fix everything. And these teens know that you can't fix anything.
You think, is that cynicism specific to this generation of teens? Are they like unusually ahead of their years in being able to see through the adult world, maybe because of the situation? Like,
I do think they are. I mean, I was very cynical, and I think about like Gen Xers, super cynical, latchkey kids. You know, we don't even need adults. Like we just raised ourselves like little wolves, going out when the street lights, were on and coming back when they turned
who
off.
knows? Wolves are probably like super well behaved and listen to their parents.
Well,
Or maybe
that's
they're
true.
not
They are
sure.
part of. They are part of. They are
That's a
a part
different
of a
novel.
pack for sure. They are
Yeah.
part of a pack for sure. But I do think these teens are just. I don't remember thinking about, will I be able to buy a home? Is the earth going to cook?
Yeah.
Like I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, my life was marked by communism and the Berlin Wall coming down. Like those were the big moments.
Yeah.
Whereas it just feels like every day there's a big moment that they're going to have to think about for their futures.
Yeah. Thank you. And Emma, can you speak a bit about that balance of wit and humor alongside?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny that you say that you have kind of a dark humor too. I absolutely do. You know, one of my favorite shows, 6 Feet Under, and anything that kind of deals with dark humor. And I think a lot of people compare me to the main character, as people do, but they say, well, it just sounds like you. It sounds like the way you talk. And I think because of the time constraint, I wasn't trying to change the voice. It was like whatever comes out. So I guess it is kind of a similar humor to my own. And I love what you said about thinking it's hilarious that we're all just pushing back against death, even though we know it's coming for us. And the main character says something right along those lines in the book as well. And I too think that that's hilarious. And I wanted to recreate the kind of, not so much at the actual funeral, the service, the eulogies, those are all very deeply sad for the most part. But when you journey towards the wake afterwards, that's usually where people start telling stories. And that's where they just lever back and forth between laughing and crying. And that line is so fine between the two. And that was kind of what I wanted to focus on, to find the humor in these moments. One of my favorite little humorous moments that I've had, that's probably had the most people say they laughed out loud at the part where she always makes a joke about when they're going to the cemetery. She says, well, it's the only gated community we'll ever afford. And and then she says, well, sometimes it lands, depending on the people. And sometimes she has to, give them a discount on memorial jewelry. And these are the kinds of things that I would probably really have to bite my tongue if I were a funeral director. Obviously, in the real world, these things don't really happen, but in a book, it just, because someone was probably thinking something like that, And so she just sort of in this book says the things that people are probably thinking at a funeral, even though that it is deeply sad, but that's the dichotomy of life, is that it's deeply sad and horrible, but it's also beautiful. Yeah.
This is very pressing of my next question, which is about these dichotomies in both your books. They both dwell on concepts of loneliness and connection, the shadow themes of suffering and love. Were there any aspects of these themes that surprised you as they emerged from the text, or were they always there in duality, right?
For me, I didn't know that she was going to develop friendships on the road. She meets someone at a cafe who kind of is, the eyeball equivalent of eavesdropping, or and just sees that what she's writing, and he turns out to be a reporter and wants to kind of cover her story. And so I didn't really expect for there to be a really strong friendship aspect of it. And I know that that's something that's, really prevalent in your book as well. I just think that there's so much room there to explore those non-romantic relationships as well that we don't always see in literature. And that was something that definitely surprised me in the dichotomy between how she was completely alone at the beginning and then at the end she came out of it, well, I don't want to spoil it, but I think it's not really one of those books that you can spoil because it's, it's pretty clear from the opening what the journey is supposed to be. But I think that's something that I didn't foresee coming, and balancing, because friendship is also the same thing, lots of laughter and then, difficulties and things like that. So yeah, that was kind of something that came in on its
And
own.
how did that emerge? Like just the character just started looking, as you were writing, the character started looking over the shoulder and wanted to be there in the scene?
Yeah, she was just in a cafe and she has a trip log that she
as you were writing.
and so it was as I was writing the trip log, and I actually also worked as a reporter for a long time, and so I thought, and I'm always observing, and that's probably what you do as a writer as well, is you're just always observing people around you and looking at how they interact with each other in the world. And I just thought, if I were a reporter and I sat down beside someone in a little cafe, in Sleepy Hollow, I think that's where she is at that point, and they wrote "Hearst may be dead," and that was all you saw on a note, I would be like, "I'm sorry, what?" And I would want to know more. I would have to know more, and that's what journalism as well. It's just storytelling. So yeah, he just popped up, and I thought, well, that makes sense if he's curious about her story because he's a journalist. So, and then as you were saying about, when we need a scene here at the beginning, that was, he got kind of in the editing process, added about like 4,000 or 5,000 words that were really just, enriching that relationship, and adding scenes with them together to tie other things together and kind of continue that thread of friendship throughout. So yeah, he just popped up out of nowhere.
I love that. The
I
muse
love
is
that you have
strong.
characters that pop up. I love it.
Well, I wonder, did that happen for you? Because there are characters that emerge in this journey.
Yeah, I knew that the characters were going to emerge for each other. I didn't know how they were going to come together, but I think for me, the surprising thing that I didn't mean for it to happen, and this is why I love writing so much, because most of the time I don't know what I was attempting to do until it's done, was the juxtaposition between technology and nature. So much of the beginning of the book is about what's happening on screens, what they view on screens, how they're connecting or not connecting with each other in their homes, separate but together. And a lot of their journey happens in nature. And I found myself thinking a lot, writing a lot about the sky, the color, the mountains, the water, and even what that meant from a spiritual perspective. Because I do think that they're so lonely in their modern lives that it's that connection to nature, spirit world, that will eventually brings them some comfort, as well as the friendships that they formed. And I didn't expect that.
Fascinating. Yeah. And it is a true inquiry that emerges through the writing, because as a reader also, I didn't, it felt like a very natural path, not like and then they went to the, it
Exactly.
was, and then they went
connected.
To the forest. Or like, and then they, So, I definitely, that is really exciting to have these naturally happen. So we've spoken a bit on the themes. I guess one of my, Asmin, I know your friends say like, oh, that voice sounds a lot like you. Clearly, you don't dress the same as your main character.
Although this is
picturing-
vintage.
I'm
This is
picturing
vintage.
I know. I was like, I want to just see the outfits alone.
Maybe Halloween.
I want to dress for like her for Halloween. So maybe you've in a way answered, but did that voice come fully formed, or did you revise it? Did you finesse her voice? Because it's a voice book, and it's a journey. It's a journey novel. So
yeah, and I think some of you kind of creeps in whether you wanted to or not, and so and a lot of people have said she does sound like you, but there's obvious differences as well. So I think the voice did just kind of come out and started to form the more I thought about what I wanted her to look like and how I wanted her to interact with the world. And yeah, so it's me, but it's not me. And I think that's the plight of the writer all the time, is trying to separate themselves from their work. But I think just that decision to go in the first person and just to kind of, dump everything out onto the page and just make it really like a conversation instead of more poetic prose, which is what I want to write and what I tend to try to write when I have more than 3 days. So yeah, she really, I didn't have the voice in my head before I started writing, but it just started coming out, oh, she wouldn't say that. She would say it like this as I kept going. Yeah.
That's a real gift when that happens.
Thank you.
Now, Gurjinder, we've, we talked about how this is very impressive that you have a third novel now starting a fourth in this very short amount of time. But this book felt like there were just like so many little details that made me like, oh, she researched. I mean, clearly she got Snapchat, right? And so on. So how did you, can you tell us a bit more about the research that went into, like, it started out with the social media angle, which seems to me would have taken a long time to research, but did you do that, or am I just making that up?
I asked a lot of questions. So I work in technology, so
Okay,
that was
yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
Because even my editor would be like, "That's not possible," and I'm like, "Oh, yes, it is." Yes, it is.
Nice.
In 2008, there was a software patch note, right? So I could say what was possible. But for a lot of it, actually, my kids were teenagers, and ever the observer. I would just watch. I would listen. I would eavesdrop to the kinds of conversations and the things they were talking about to understand their language and how they were using tech. And then I would just ask them. It was during this time Snapchat was the thing. TikTok was not yet even a thing. So it was all Snapchat. I tried and I hated it so much. And so I would just get them to teach me the things that I needed to know. To help me through. But, there was a fair amount of research around the darker places of the internet, like some of the internet games and some of the trolling and like things like the choking game or like the blue whale game is a real thing. Right. And just doing that, it was really, I just was careful to just do enough research that didn't swallow me up. Because it is really sad when you start to hear this and read the statistics that, suicide's the second killer of young people next to motor vehicle accidents. And it's just getting worse. And self-harming is, so I went down that rabbit hole of self-harm and right, because that's a rising trend as well, even more so now since the pandemic. But it was, I think that's the thing about research. You have to protect yourself as a writer and not let it overwhelm you and not let it overwhelm the story. Like it just needs enough detail.
Yep. So you could feel it when the black hole was, when you were like, when you had that
Step
one
back.
foot in and then you would just be like, I have enough research, I'm writing, just
For
putting
sure.
that in and then out I go.
I would clear
Yeah.
that search history every single day because it
Yeah.
was depressing.
Yeah. I mean, even as a parent, like, you were curious about what your teens were going through, but having research, you probably didn't feel any better.
No.
After that.
No.
Yeah.
And was it harder to get your head into the mindset of the young adults, or was it, in other books that you've written with adult protagonists, is it comparable, or is it more challenging to get into the head of a young adult?
I think it wasn't challenging to get in their heads because there's certain things that are always the same. You were young once. There's certain things that are still the same, but there was a lot of trying to get it right. At first I would say early drafts, and even my sons would read some of it and say, this sounds like an adult trying to write a young person. This wouldn't happen. Nobody would say this.
Yeah.
Life is not like Euphoria. Right. It is not an HBO TV show. Like bring it down a notch.
Okay.
So that was helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was really interested in there's some jargon where I was like, do people still say mouth breather, right? And
Maybe
like
not now.
No, but you had it vetted.
2019.
Yeah, you had it vetted by Authentic Teens.
Yeah.
So yeah, stamp of approval, right? Amazing. Just thank you. You've both been so generous in kind of speaking about your themes and your process, and these couldn't have been easy books to write, and that must have been pre-pandemic in a way, right?
Mhm.
But these also probably were not that easy to launch in these times, and edit. I don't know where the process was in terms of the pandemic, but with the spread of COVID and the accumulating climate crisis, what was it like to work on these topics and these themes during these very heavy times? Or, if they were completed before the pandemic, what was it like to prepare for the releases and go through the edits? Like, I don't know. Can you speak a bit about that?
I'm nodding because I moved to Toronto in 2019, September 2019, for this postgraduate certificate in publishing. And it's a compressed course. So we had 14 courses in 8 months, the last of which is a final placement. And the world shut down literally like the week before we were supposed to start our final placements. And so our entire class, 50 students couldn't graduate from our programs. A lot of I was serving at the time. I lost my serving job. I lost my job at the gym, and was sort of just sitting there kind of like huddled in my bathtub, drinking wine, wondering what was going to become of publishing, because I had sunk, everything into it, because, I moved back to Canada to do this course. And so this kind of really saved me in a sense.
This was
2020. Yeah. So this was
2020.
September 2020. It's always the Labor Day long weekend. So that was kind of, things were sort of okay-ish at that point, but still very closed. And so I was able to use that time as a time to just refocus on writing and why I love it, and books, and to see this launch, despite the pandemic. It was really just affirming, and I really truly, after all of this, I don't think books will ever go anywhere. I have faith in them, and in the people that really see their worth and their value. So yeah.
I think I was in an event yesterday, the BC and Yukon Book Prizes, and there's a comment that this proved that we need art, right?
Yes.
The pandemic showed us why. Of course we need a lot of other things, but books and media were a big part of that.
And book
survival.
sales went through the roof, especially digital formats, which is what I do in my regular job as well in tech. And we just saw exponential growth in our sales in this time. And I was like, okay, we're okay. We're going to be okay.
So it gave you extra time to do the editing process, and to even, maybe you wouldn't have even done it without the pandemic.
I don't think so.
You would not have sat down and done it through the
because I
novel.
would have been like, well, I've got other stuff to do.
Yeah, fascinating. That's so interesting. So you didn't consider a downside to launch a debut during just an uncertain.
I mean, maybe for you it might have been different. I didn't know any different. So this was, and also it's kind of a strange way to get into publishing as well. It wasn't the regular channel. So to me, I was just, thrilled that it was happening at all. But I don't know if maybe it was different for you.
I finished writing it right before the pandemic. So I was done writing, and it was off to an agent trying to be sold. And I think as the pandemic went on, I felt that it had even more relevance than I had intended it to have, because now everybody was super messed up. Like, you just couldn't even hide that. You can't even hide your challenges. Like, it's all raw, it's all exposed. Everyone is a open sore and a nerve ending. And so I felt that there was like so much urgency. But for me, I came up against something else, like just personally, in that it was also, we had a lot of conversations around race and diversity starting in 2020. And this was actually the first book that race didn't really feature as a central issue to the story. And so part of that is like, is this the story that I need to write right now? Is there a different story that would reach an audience that I've already reached better? And so I had a lot of like personal reflections on what kind of book do I want to write, and so for me, clearly I went ahead and wrote it, but I had difficulty finding the right place for it, because there was just so much going on in the world, and there was so many different voices and different stories. And then now as a writer of color, I had questions of, as a writer of color now, do I just need to always write about that? Can I write about people of color that are in a mixed, blended family and their story actually isn't about their race, right? Because to me, diversity is diversity of story.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of those thoughts. And I think
As you were trying to edit it.
as I was trying to edit
So
it.
you were having, so it sounds like, again, zeitgeist
Totally.
informs your practice.
Yes.
And you were just having the internal, because you've already written it, but you
Yeah.
were like, is this the book that needs to be released at this time?
Exactly.
So
Should it just be shelved? Should we just stop trying to find it a home?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so grateful that you came out on the other side of that and we got to read this book,
Thank
because
you.
as you mentioned, both very applicable, and we need kind of like these narratives about death and reckoning with life and what it is to live after others have left us, and kind of like, how do we think? I mean, one of the things that's really neat about Unrest is she actually is an advocate, right, for better ways of finding our resting place, and kind of like thinking about that, not the afterlife, but what how does one go? So both of these were just really interesting to read at this very time, and I'm just grateful to you for taking on the big topics.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I love that they put our books together too, because they do just go together so nicely. And it's such an important topic to think about death, and so many people just avoid it completely, regardless of what the situation was. So it's great to talk about, in this kind of format, because it just means that you're continuing the conversation, and it's such an important one to have.
Yeah, and the really interesting thing, that's so beautifully put, but also with like the social media angle of Help I'm Alive, it feels relevant, even though it's obvious it's like a pre-pandemic time period that the novel's in, but these issues haven't gone away. The tech hasn't even gone away.
No.
Like, we're still using the same programs somehow because we were in that limbo state. So just really fascinating. Thank you. So we have time for a few questions if anyone has any. Yeah.
One of the researching that you guys did was researching like how other people handle the kind of situations that your characters were in, or did you guys just like, okay, this is my character, I think this is how they would react?
Yeah, I didn't research. I didn't research too much about how other people might have reacted in situations in terms of like actual fingers to the keyboard research. I did a lot of watching, just in terms of what are other young people doing, what are their lived experiences, and just trying to understand as much and many experiences as I could. And then also, because there's parental figures, just watching how different parents were parenting. So I did a lot of informal reconnaissance, hiding behind plants. No, I just did a lot of watching how people were parenting, and reading a lot about the impacts that different styles of parenting were having.
For me, I definitely, I looked at how other people were processing or not processing death at all. There were a few different deaths in kind of succession in my life. And I just thought it was so interesting to kind of take a back seat and observe. None of them were in my own family. So I think because I wasn't in the grieving process, as deeply as maybe some other people were, I was able to kind of step back and say, oh, that's interesting. There's a complete avoidance here. And then there's the complete opposite on the other end, where people are, all they want to do is talk about it. And so I definitely looked at how people were processing things in real life. And that's kind of thematically where things came into the book that I wanted Milen to really kind of, like you kept saying, the wonderful world reckon with, and to just face it, And so it definitely did come from informal research as well. I never wrote anything down, but it's, again, just from observing and wondering why is it like that? Yeah.
So your observances were in real life. Did you look towards any kind of other texts, or were there like novels that inspired you, or kind of even like, all of us have watched more streaming media. So were
Mhm.
there any, or did you not allow yourself to look outside and just focus on your?
For me, I had there was a YouTube a mortician that I watched on YouTube for research, and also a doula that has her
Death
own
doula.
a death doula, yeah, that has her own channel. So because of I didn't have time to read anything else, right? So I was like, YouTube, okay, that's my research. There was just not enough time, but just kind of watching other people that are in the actual roles was what I did.
It's so interesting though, like when you think, so I think I just write about grief and death. My last book was about death too. And I think that when people look at books like this, they read the back and they're like, oh, death, depressing. And yet we love a good murder. Like we love true crime, we love dismemberment, we love all the gore. And so I've come to realize that people just don't like regular death.
Yeah.
They want the kind
Violent
that,
death
yeah, they want the
preferred.
kind that won't happen to them, that likely won't happen to them, but they don't want to see the regular everyday pain of being alive and dying up close.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think that's why the title "Help, I'm Alive" kind of just sums it all up, right? Just like it's just like yes, that is the human struggle, and
Such a great title.
yeah, and unrest as well. It's just like yeah, I think both these titles and covers just really captured that thoughtfulness that both of you brought to these subjects and topics. So I'm really grateful that we had a chance to talk about this.
Thank you so much.
So much.
Yeah, thank you both. So once again, thank you all who've come, and thank you for joining us. And those of you who are joining us online and at home, thank you so much. I think this will continue to be around on the interwebs for about 2 weeks, so you can definitely send that through your channels or rewatch it, which I think I definitely will, because I think there are some really interesting points that I'd like to revisit. And for those of you that are here, please visit the official bookseller, Iron Dog Books, and Gurjinder and Emma are signing at the book signing table. And a huge thank you to the staff and the volunteers at Word Vancouver. Thank you all. And to make this, again, it's just so cool to be in person, but also to be able to stream.
Yeah.
That's just really neat. Nice channel change after all the online events we've been doing. So thank you for making this possible. A big thank you to the tech team from Stay at Home Fundraising for helping to bring this event to those of you online. And there are events happening right through till 8 p.m. Please check out the complete listing at wordvancouver.ca. Thanks so much. And thank you, Emma.
Thank
and thank you,
you.
Gurjinder.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.